Hi everyone, I'm Elad. I'm a CSS, HTML architect, and code evangelist at Animap. Besides this, I love CSS and I'm writing lots of articles on CSS that you can find in this link at medium.com, and I'm community leader at CSS Class on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I love to talk about CSS in every meetup and every conference. And we are here in this online conference, of course, everything because the coronavirus pandemic. The coronavirus pandemic is disrupted our life in so many ways. Even for me, that I needed to talk in two big conferences in Europe, of course, all the conference in Europe has been cancelled in all the world. And in this situation in life, you can maybe be sad. But from my perspective of view, we don't have time to be sad. Why is that? Because life is very, very short. And we need to always to find ways to create from a bad situation, a good situation, and enjoy life. And this is exactly what I do when the coronavirus pandemic has started. The first day that we stayed home, I thought to myself, this is the really first time that I have a lot of free time at home. I never at home. We're working 5 days a week usually. In the morning traffic, in the evening traffic, and in the weekend we're so tired that we don't have power to do anything. And in the first few days in my apartment, I arranged my apartment that it will feel more good for me to stay at home. I opened my couch to a bed that I can sometimes will sleep in the living room, and the aquarium that didn't work for 5 years. I put some water, some fishes, and everything that I will have a better mood to stay at home, because now we will be a lot of time at home. And then came the first weekend. In the weekend we cannot do anything, not go out, nothing. And I thought for myself, it's maybe a good time to create for myself a project. And I remembered that 7 years ago I created a pure CSS game that it called Kill the Birds, and a lot of web developers in the world like it very much. And I thought to myself that in the last 7 years I learned so many tricks in CSS that maybe it's a time to create a new better one, and this is exactly what I've done. And if we talking about how to create something bad, a good thing, this is exactly what I've done. I created from this coronavirus pandemic a coronavirus game. And I call this game the Coronavirus Invaders. And everything that you see in this game, it's HTML and CSS, no JavaScript, not even single line of JavaScript. Everything HTML and CSS. Yes, I'm using some preprocessor. I'm using the SAS preprocessor for the CSS, and I'm using the PUG preprocessor for the HTML. Yes, there is a HTML preprocessor, and we will talk about them later. But all the logic here, pure CSS. When I will click the button who am I, it will open a pop-up. When I will press the close button, it will close the pop-up. And all this logic, no JavaScript. And when I will press the save the world button, it will close the main navigation and open the game. Even this, no JavaScript at all. And then when I will click those coronavirus creature, they will disappear and the counter will go up. Again, all this logic, no JavaScript, pure CSS. And even the countdown that you're seeing here, even that is a pure CSS. Okay. Before you start any project, it doesn't matter which project, you have to get some inspiration. And inspiration is not to think about some stuff in your head. Sometimes it's to look about other example or other things that you remember and to create from a lot of example a new example. And this is exactly what I have done. I remember that I saw painting in Canvas, in CodePen, Canvas HTML, that was creating some unique creatures that remind me the coronavirus creature. And I thought I will maybe use some ideas from these coronavirus creatures. And how will I call the game? How the main navigation will look? I remember the Chicken Invaders game, and my game is the Coronavirus Invaders. So yes, only because the invaders from the Chicken Invaders. And I'm not a designer. I'm very love HTML and CSS, but I'm not a designer. Because of that, I took some of the ideas of how to create the main navigation from this same game. And The first thing that I wanted to do is to paint my new coronavirus creature that I need for my own game. And it's very funny to see that this was my inspiration, and in the end I created something very different. And I like that I created something very different, because this, in my way, it's more mine. And at the end I maybe only use how the eyes are painted. Very similar eyes, but all the other things are very, very different. And then I structure my HTML. And when I'm creating an HTML, I don't just put some stuff on the HTML. I really think how it looks, that it will be readable, that it will be in an object-oriented way, that everything will be according to the object. And I created this label with the name of the class coronavirus. And why it's a label and why there is an input type of radio, this is some of the trick of the game that we will talk about them later. But from here inside, all the body and all the air element and the eyes elements are all the style that we see for these creatures, are all the parts that with them will paint the creature. And from the body of the coronavirus, we see here the sculpt with all the 12 hairs and some 2 eyes that we have here and here. But when I started to create the game, when I started to create the game, I saw that I repeating a lot of HTML elements, like these 12 hairs. And I have in the game 100 viruses. It means that I taking the creature of the HTML and put it 100 times in the HTML. But wait a minute, what? I copy paste it? No. In CodePen, you have the possibility to work with HTML preprocessor. And this is the first time in my life that I'm using the Pug HTML preprocessor that give us the possibility to repeat a lot of HTML in a better way. And yes, of course, I'm using the SAS preprocessor that I'm using in all and every project in the last 9 years. But Pug HTML processor is written very, very different from regular HTML. You need to get used to it. In project that you have a lot of repetition and you're doing in CodePen only for fun, this is the best way to use Pug. I'm not using it in real life project, but in CodePen, it's really helped me a lot to create this pure CSS game. All this HTML that you see here are just created with this Pug HTML processor. It's written very different from regular HTML, but it's giving it the possibility to create a loop with a variable of n that started with 1 and the while loop going between 1 to 12 and printing all this 12 span HTML element with the class air and dynamic adding it a number, and every rotation this number is going up. Very nice way to create this repetition. And yes, you need to get used to write the Pug HTML processor. You cannot write half HTML and half Pug. When you're working with Pug, you have to write everything with Pug, and it means that instead of writing this, everything need to be written in the Pug HTML preprocessor. And then I wanted to start to painting the coronavirus creature, and I started in the body. That is the main part of the coronavirus creature. I gave it position relative because all the other parts, the hair and the eyes, need to be according to the body of this creature. I gave it a width and height of 100 pixels, background color black, and border radius of 50%. This way I created this black circle. And then I wanted to create the eyes. I have 2 HTML elements, one I1 and the second one I2. How can I select them both? I can select them with the attribute selector and the star sign. This way it's searching if there is a class that have the word I. This way it's selecting together the I1 and the I2. I created again 2 circles, width of 20 pixels, height of 26 pixels, background color white, and border radius of 50%. This way it's getting the egg shape. I position them from the top, position absolute from the top, 25%. The eye left I position from the left of 25%. I rotate it a little bit to the inside with the transform property with the rotate Z value and a value of 13 degrees. The second right eye from right 25%, rotate Z, but now minus 15 degrees. This way, both of the eyes go. And then I wanted to create the inner part of the eyes, and it's really the same idea. Width and height 8 pixels, border radius of 50%, and background color black, and I created these both circles inside the bigger eye with the pseudo element of the before attribute. But then I needed to create all these errors, and these things need to be very, very thinking in a mathematically way. Every error is created from two boxes with the pseudo element before and after. The after is the root of the error, one box, and the second, the crown of the error is another box that's putting more up. How it getting circle? Again, border radius of 50%. And then I need to locate all these hairs. And to locate them in a smart way, I located all 12 hairs in the middle and the center of the body of the virus. And from this point, I need to put them with the transform property according to the circle of the virus. How I'm doing it? The first hair is with transform rotate z, 0 degrees, it means that it doesn't change, and a translate y from the center to the top minus 65 pixel. But now the second hair need to be top and little bit to the right. How I'm doing it? The hair 2 will get rotate z of 30 degrees and a translate y of minus 65 pixel. This way it's going top right. How it's doing it? Because the translate y is affected by the rotate z that come before. And when you are working with transform property, if you don't know, the order of the value is very important. If you're writing it in a different order, it will work different. Very, very important when you're working with the transform property of CSS. This way I located all those 12 hairs according around the coronavirus creatures. And wait a minute, what I'm doing here, I'm repeating a lot of code. I cannot write it in a better way? Of course I can. How we can do it? We can use in SAS processor the for each loop. And I'm creating a variable that called start position. I give it a value of 0 degrees. I'm creating the for loop with a variable of I that going between 1 to 12. The class is getting a dynamic name between air1 and air12 in every loop. The position of the transform is getting up with its own value, is getting in every loop another 13 degrees. This way, the first hair 30, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, and so on and on. And this way I'm locating all the hairs around the coronavirus creature. And this loop create me this HTML in the regular CSS. Very nice trick. But I wanted that the coronavirus would be more alive. And for that I gave it more animations. I gave it an error for all the crown hair animation. And because that every crown have different rotate z value, I needed to create 12 keyframes. But because I have a for loop, I just put the create keyframe dynamically in the same for loop and with dynamic name with the same high of the for loop value. This way I'm creating keyframe 1 air move 1, air move 2, and so on and so on and so on. But I wanted that all the airs will move in a different timeline. And I can do it with animation delay, but if I will give it animation delay of positive values, for example, 60 millisecond, 120 millisecond, 180 millisecond, the air will first start and then will start to move. But you don't want it. You want that all the air will move in the first second of the page that is loaded. How can we do it? Instead of using positive animation delay value, we can use negative values in the animation delay. It means that the first hair is minus 60 milliseconds, the second hair is minus 120 milliseconds, and so on and so on. This way the animation is act like it's loaded, it started even before the page is loaded. And this is a really nice trick to create animation in different timeline that it's already moving when the page is loading. But I wanted that this animation would be a lot more alive, and I gave some animation to the eyes for the inner part of the eyes, little bit animation, and I wanted to create effect that the eyes are getting closed. How can we do it? I'm using here the second pseudo element of the after pseudo element, and I created a box that is width of 100% and height of 0 pixel with a background color of black. But because it's with a 0 height pixel, we don't see it. But every 5 seconds, in the last half second, it's getting in height of 100%. And this way the eyes are getting closed. Another nice trick. But enough about the CSS creature. Let's talk about the frame of the game. before you start to create the pure CSS game, you need to understand how frames of games are working. Let's see the game and understand how what frame that we have in this game. The main frame that we have here is the main navigation frame. This is the first frame of the game. I have, when I click the autoplay, another pop-up. This is the second frame. Frame can go up on another frame, it's okay. The third frame is the who am I pop-up. Another frame of pop-up. Same idea, but this is the third frame. The last frame is when I will click the Save the World button, the main navigation will disappear, and instead we will see the main frame of the game itself. We have 4 frames from the game. How we write it in the HTML, I just created separate section HTML element. It can be any HTML, I like sections, and every section is a separated frame of the game. The first one, as you can see here, is the game menu frame. The second one is the game itself. The third one is the who am I pop-up, and the fourth one is the autoplay pop-up. 4 frames for the game. And how I'm showing only the main frame of the game and not the other frame in the first load of the page, I'm just putting them with the display none value. Yes, all these frames that we don't want to see in the first load of the game, display none. Very easy. But now I want to create a flags to tell me what frame need to be show up in our visual. How can we do it? I'm doing it with using the input type of checkbox. And I have here 3 input of checkbox. One with a special ID of toggle game. And if this ID is unchecked, it means that I want to see the menu frame and not to see the game frame. And if it's checked, I want to see the game frame and not to see the game menu frame. For the 2 other checkbox, it's even more simple. If the autoplay checkbox pop-up is unchecked, it's meaning that I don't want to see the pop-up. If it's checked, it's meaning that I want to see the pop-up. The same way for the OMI pop-up. If it's unchecked, I don't want to see the OMI pop-up. If it's checked, I want to see the OMI pop-up. But how can I trigger this checkbox? This checkbox, you don't see them because they are with opacity of 0. But how can we trigger those inputs in the game? How can we trigger to tell the checkbox to be checked or unchecked only with HTML and CSS? How can we do it? The button of the game are not button. They are HTML labels. It means that all the things that look like button in the games, they are HTML labels. And with label, we can trigger input. How can we do it? Label, we can use the for attribute, and the for attribute we give the ID of the input. For example, Save the World button has this label have a for attribute for the toggle game idea, for this one, for the first one. It means that when I will click the Save the World button, behind the scenes is checking check the checkbox. It means that when I will click it, it will check the checkbox. If I will click it again, it will uncheck it. The same way for the autoplay. If I will click the autoplay label, it will trigger the autoplay input. And if I will check it again, it will uncheck this input. This is the idea. All of these labels can do check or uncheck depending the amount of clicks. But this still doesn't show or hide the frame of the game. How I'm doing it, and here comes the magic. I'm using the sibling selector with the pseudo element of check. This way I can tell that if you can tell a specific input of checkbox, if you are checked, go to any sibling elements that come after and put it display block, display none, everything that you need, any logic. And this way this flag of checkbox can hide or show other frame. And this is exactly what I'm doing in this game. It means that when I'm clicking, for example, the Who Am I button, it's triggered the input that called Who Am I pop-up and put it with a checked. And this way I'm putting it style that if this input is checked, go to the sibling element with the ID of Who Am I and putting with display block. If I'm pressing the autoplay button, I'm checking the checkbox that called autoplay pop-up with ID, and if it's checked, go to the sibling element of autoplay and put it display block. This way I'm showing these two pop-up. But wait a minute, how I'm closing this pop-up? And this is the same trick. These buttons that you see here, the close button and the X button, are not buttons, they are labels. And with them I can trigger any checkbox that I want. For example, for the autoplay, these both buttons are triggering the checkbox that called how to play pop-up. And this way when I click this or this, it's uncheck the checkbox that before got checked. And this way I'm closing the pop-up. Very nice trick. But when I'm pressing the button of save the world, I'm doing two actions. First, I'm hiding the main navigation, and then I put on up the game itself. How I'm doing it, I need now two operations, not one. And it's very easy, it's the same idea. When the checkbox that called toggle game is checked, I'm going to the game menu frame and put it with display none. And beside of it, I'm going to the game frame and put it with display block. I can do as many actions as I want. Very easy, nice trick. This is written, of course, everything here is written with SAS preprocessor. You can write it in CSS in two separated selectors, but it will work the same way. Okay, let's talk about more tricks. In the game, when I'm clicking the viruses, they are getting hide. I'm disappearing them, and the scoring is going up. How can I do it? I'm using here the CSS counters that exist very long time ago in CSS. But before we talk about how I'm using the CSS counters, let's talk about first how the coronavirus creature are acting. Because every coronavirus, as I told you in the beginning of the talk, is an HTML label. And all the style of the coronavirus are starting from here. All the look of it, the body, the ears, the eyes, are inside the coronavirus body, on divs the element, inside of this div. And how I'm telling when I'm clicking the virus that it will be disappear. All the virus is a label, and if I'm clicking the label, because there is an input with a type of radio inside, when I'm clicking the label, it's automatically, if it's have input inside, it automatically trigger this input, and this input will automatically trigger to trigger the radio button, and it will get checked. It means that no matter what place I'm clicking the coronavirus, the input type radio will be checked. Why I'm not using here checkbox and I'm using radio buttons? Because radio buttons can be checked only one time, and this is a good thing. Why is that? Because when it's getting checked, that means that this virus is dead, and I don't want that if I will double click it, it will be alive again. And because of that, I'm using here input type of radio. And how I'm hiding the virus? If this input type of radio is checked, go to the sibling element with the same way that we saw before, and put this div, the class of body, with opacity of 0. And this is the trick of how the virus is acting. But how I'm counting all these dead viruses? I need to create a CSS counter. It needs to be that it will work good. It needs to be before all those input in the games. I just created a CSS counter on the body HTML element with the property that called counter reset. You give it any name that you want. I gave it the name Corona, and now I need to count all those input with the type of radio that are being checked. This is very easy too. Input type radio with the pseudo element of checked, using the counter increment and increment the value that we created here, the Corona. This way all the check radio button are being counted. And now we wanted to print it on the screen. To print it on the screen, the HTML that is printing on the screen have to be after all those inputs. I created the summarize here. If you want to put it in the top of the screen, you can do it with CSS with position fixed. But in the HTML, it have to be after all those input type of radio. And this div with class of sum with the pseudo element of after, I'm using the CSS property of content that can get the counter function, that can get the value that of the corona value that increment here, and we declare it in the beginning of the body HTML element. This way I'm printing all the total score of all those input type radio that are checked. this is a lot of information. Because of that, we will see a live example. In this example, I created 5 coronavirus creature, but with a lot less parts that the HTML will be a lot simple. Every coronavirus is a label with a class of coronavirus. Inside we have the input type of radio. In regularly I put it with opacity of 0, but I want you to see it in this example. All the part of the coronavirus creature, the body, this is the body, the eyes, the ears, all of them are inside here. Written all the HTML inside the body. And now how the logic work. As I told you, if an input type of radio is checked, the counter increment will go up, and it will go to the sibling element, this body, and will put it with opacity of 0. And here I declare the counter reset with the value of corona that I'm declaring here. When the input type of radio are checked, the counter increment will go up with the same value that we declare on the body. And when you want to print it on the screen, I need to print it on any HTML element that come after all this input. I created here the div with class of sum, and with the pseudo element of after, with the content property, with the counter function, I'm just printing the corona value. And it really works. When I will click this, the value will go up, and the body of the coronavirus that I click will be disappear. And it doesn't matter which way, it's just counting all those checkboxes that are being, all those radio buttons that are being checked. And this is one of the most important tricks when you're creating a pure CSS game. Very, very nice trick. Let's continue. CSS countdowns. How can we create the countdown of this pure CSS game only with CSS? We're using here the pseudo element again before and after. In the HTML there isn't any number, nothing. This is the counter of this countdown. And I'm using here the pseudo element before and after with a CSS animation on the content property that we can do in CSS. This number is going between 9 to 0, but wait a minute, it's between 9 to 0, but the number is going between 99 to 0. How I'm doing it? I'm just put the animation on the 2 pseudo element, one for the before pseudo element and the second one for the after pseudo element. But how they're acting different, I'm acting the animation in a different way in every one of them. In the before pseudo element, I'm using the animation of countdown that will take 100 seconds and iterate it only one time. And it means that this number between 9 to 0 will change every 10 seconds. 9, 8, 10 seconds, yes, 7, and after 10 seconds 6, and so on and so on. And how the second number is working? It's using the same animation, but now for 10 seconds and 10 times. And it means that it's now going 9, 8, 7, 6, 10. It will go until that to 0, and when we go to 0, it will do it again between 9 to 0, 10 times. And when it finishes, you want that the number will stack at the 0 value. How can we do it? You have to put here the forward value. This means that when all the iterations are finished, it will stack on the last frame of the animation. Very, very nice trick to create a CSS countdown. And it's nice to see that it's working, like it's really one number that's going down, but it's 2 numbers that work separately. Nice trick to create a CSS countdown. Random values to create pure CSS game. Why we need random values? In the game, let's see it in live. When we play the game, all the coronavirus creature are with different sizes and different rotation and in different position in 6 points of the game. All the position of these coronavirus creatures is random values. How can we do random values in CSS? In CSS we cannot do randomized values, but we can do it with Sass. And I want you that you will see this example because this is one of the most important examples of how to create randomized in CSS. Every coronavirus in the game getting different keyframe. It's meaning that creating 100 keyframes from 100 viruses. What, I'm copy paste my code? No, I'm using again the for loop of Sass and creating dynamically 100 keyframes. But how I'm telling every keyframe, every animation to act different, to be in different position? I have the random function, and here I'm telling it in 6 points of the game to get a translate value between 1 to 80 VH. And all these numbers are getting dynamically and randomized. And I'm using it even for the scale of the virus, even for the rotation of the virus. And for you to believe me that it's really real, all these randomized values, I want you that you will see this example. I created a less complicated example. This is our HTML, 6 HTML elements. This is all these 6 HTMLs. As you can see, there isn't any numbers or values that you see here. These values that I put it inside, I'm using here the for loop that we have in SAS that going between 1 to 6. And just printing to the screen with the before pseudo element and the content property, random number that going between 1 to 80 VH. And all these values that you see here are random. You don't believe me? Let's check it out. When I will do it enter, you will see the numbers are changing. Again, all the numbers are changing according just because I'm pressing enter in the SAS file. And this is the way that you can create something that is more alive in CSS and with randomized value. Very, very nice trick to create pure CSS game. Let's continue. The game over curtain, you didn't see it because we didn't play for 100 seconds. But after 100 seconds, the game over curtain need to go up automatically. How can we do it with pure CSS? And this is one of the easiest tricks. What is the trick here? The animation of the curtain is taking 0.6 seconds. It's an HTML element with a height of 0 and overflow hidden, only that it will stack in the top and with opacity of 0. And in the last second, we have this animation that's taking a 0.6 second. But how can I know when to put the game over curtain? I want that it's in the last, in the right timing of this animation, it will get a height of 100 VH with opacity of 0. How can I know when to put it? And this is really, really nice trick, because the animation is take only 0.6 seconds. But I can give it animation delay, for example, for 5 seconds. And in the real game, I'm just putting here 100 seconds. You don't believe me? Let's check it out. You now need to count between 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Nice trick to create the game over curtain. In this way, I'm just putting the game over curtain after 100 seconds. We talk about here a lot of trick, but what you can learn from this talk is you can learn how to create pure CSS game, but this isn't the most important idea. The most important idea that when we are children and we are playing, this is the best way that our mind are working. Even in the animal kingdom, when cats are playing, this way they learn how to take their food from the nature. And the most important thing for you to understand that if you want to be better a developer, if you will create a project yourself that you will enjoy them, and you will stack on hard stuff that you don't succeeding to solve, you will solve it at the end because it's important to you. And when you are playing, you're enjoying everything, even in the art stuff that you're creating. And if you're creating for yourself a project that you're stuck and you learn, this way you need to learn very, very fast. And I think the best way to learn is by playing. There isn't any better way. And we forget it when we are getting adult and we're learning stuff not in a nice way. But if you will play and create your own project, and it doesn't need to be a pure CSS game, create any project that you like, anything that you like, this way you will be a better web developers. And this is the most important stuff. Play with your own code. You will enjoy it, you have fun, and you will be a lot better web developers. Before we finish, if you want to know more how I created this CSS game more deeply with more exactly example, I wrote 2 articles. One, how to create a CSS creature, and the second one, how to create a pure CSS game. I will tweet these slides and these both links and everything after the talk in my Twitter account. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on my Twitter account. You can read all my articles, and I have a lot of them in medium.com in this link, and to see all my other talks in my own website. And if you want to ask me some question, you can join the CSS Class community on Facebook and LinkedIn. And thank you very much for listening.